My wife cheated with my best friend, tried to pass his baby as mine, but got the ultimate revenge. Today, my wife gave birth, and it seems like my marriage has come to an end. I'm almost completely sure it's over. Though, I'll have official confirmation soon normally. This would take a while, but the hospital is hurrying the DNA test due to special circumstances. I doubt the outcome will change anything as I sit in a bar just 10 minutes away from the hospital. My phone keeps going off on the table. I keep glancing at the screen. Even though I know the doctor won't call for a few more hours at least. I'm ignoring calls from my wife, kids, and in-laws. I'm pretty sure they all want to know what's happening, and honestly so. Do I? The baby is adorable with blonde curls like her mother. She weighed 7 pounds, 12 and measured 19 in long at birth, a perfect full-term baby. But according to my wife, she was premature by about 6 weeks. I don't have a medical degree, but I'm not stupid either. Baby born that early wouldn't look as perfect in its development and coloring. My wife lied big time, and now that I'm seeing things clearly, I know my biggest fear has come true. The child she's claiming is mine is actually my late best friend's. The waitress brings my 5th shot of Jack Daniels. At this rate, I'll spend $1,150 on a bottle that usually costs $125. But honestly, I don't care. I sink back into my numbness. The Three Amigos feels like a lifetime ago, especially for Gary. Tracy and I were like a trio from the time our families moved onto the same block, all within a 2-year span. When we were around 5 years old, Gary's family and mine moved in during the summer, and Tracy's family joined us the following spring. Gary and I were already close, but Tracy blended in perfectly, being quite the tomboy back then. She could outrun me and outmuscle Gary, and there wasn't a sport or game we played without her. While other girls played with dolls, Tracy was out playing kickball or stickball with us guys, and she held her own as we hit our teenage years. Things changed a bit. Tracy, especially, transformed physically. She went from a skinny blonde with long pigtails to a young lady with developing curves, silky hair, and a new shape. Both Gary and I noticed, but we kept quiet about it, afraid Tracy might knock us down if we said anything. A year later, Gary occasionally wasn't around for some reason, and I didn't really mind those times. Tracy and I felt closer, both physically and emotionally, one summer Sunday afternoon, when Gary was out with his family. Tracy and I sat together on my porch swing. I can't recall what we were talking about, but suddenly, she leaned over and gave me my first kiss. Wow, I whispered, unable to say anything else. Tracy blushed. As we locked eyes, I reached for her hand, and we sat together, rocking the next day. Gary was back, and if I hadn't been part of the kiss the day before, I wouldn't have believed it happened. Tracy acted like nothing was different. At one point, I tried to hold her hand, but she calmly pulled away. I was confused as our freshman year's Christmas dance approached. I thought it was the right time to ask Tracy officially. One day, as we walked home from school, I mustered the courage to ask Trace, if you're not busy next month, would you like to go to the Christmas dance with me? Tracy, who was walking between Gary and me, suddenly stopped, making us halt too. I noticed Gary smirking as we paused. I'm already going with Gary. He asked me yesterday. Bobby. Tracy seemed uneasy. Gary grinned, and I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. So sorry, Bobby, you were too slow. Gary chuckled. I felt foolish in 2 ways. First, I had no clue Gary liked Tracy, and second, there's an unspoken rule among guys: you don't mess with your buddy's girl, even if I was just figuring things out. Hey Gar, I didn't mean anything by asking. I didn't know, man. I understand. Bobby, no hard feelings, he said cheerfully. Tracy squirmed uncomfortably for the rest of the walk home. She and Gary chatted, while I stayed quiet. I didn't invite anyone else to the dance, and I didn't go solo. I felt let down by both my closest friends that night. My dad noticed I was down and guessed why. He found in my room listening to music. Girls, huh? He said, settling into the chair at my desk. Can't live with them, can't kill them. I shook off my thoughts, surprised by his words. He grinned at me. Thanks, Dad, I appreciate it. I replied with nothing more. Said the Three Amigos became the Two Amigos and their friend. After the dance, Tracy and Gary became an official couple, sticking together through high school. I eventually started dating other girls. The Two Amigos parted ways. When college started, Tracy headed to Michigan State, while Gary chose UCLA. I ended up at Michigan State too, but I kept my distance from Tracy during our first year. Out of respect for Gary, Tracy was confused by this, but I didn't want anyone thinking I was trying to come between her and Gary. One day, Tracy's mum, who I saw as a second mum, asked if I was upset with her daughter Rhonda and Mark Ford were like family to me. And I respected them a lot. She misses the old days. Bobby, Mrs. F, told me can't go back, Mrs. F, we're not kids anymore, and if she's not with me, Gary's the best guy for her, I replied. Things stayed the same sophomore year. But near the end of junior year, Tracy invited me to her sorority formal. I was surprised and cautious. Tracy, aren't you still with Gary? I asked. I don't want to cause any issues. Gary and I split after summer, she said. He's staying in California for law school. And didn't want to hold me back. Law school, Gary, that's unexpected. I said our first date was uncertain. She asked for a second, and by the fourth we were intimate. I noticed she wasn't innocent, but I wasn't either, so I let it be. We dated for 2 years before tying the knot. Despite my reservations, Gary stood by as my best man. It was awkward having the guy who used to date and be intimate with your spouse as your main supporter during the wedding ceremony. After the wedding, Gary returned to California. And I didn't think much about him for over 2 decades. Our daughter, Kay, arrived 2 years after our marriage, followed by our son Jeffrey. 2 years later, we learned from my mum that Gary would be visiting home soon. Our parents still live nearby. And Mrs. Prescott mentioned to my mum that Gary was coming back to bid farewell. He had cancer and wanted to see his folks. While he still had the strength, my mum proposed organizing a gathering for him to see old friends and family, which Gary's mum agreed to. Despite being in the early stages of treatment, Gary looked relatively well, though his deep sadness was apparent. He was alone, divorced twice, and childless. The 3 of us, Gary, Tracy, and Anne, I spent hours discussing life, particularly his, and how it would conclude. Towards the end of the evening, Tracy proposed an idea that would later strain our marriage. How about we come out and care for you until it's time for hospice? Tracy asked. Both Gary and I were taken aback by Tracy's proposal. It wasn't something we had discussed before, and initially, I wasn't sure how we could make it happen. Hell, our oldest friend Bobby, who else could do this? Tracy argued, but the doctors say I might have several months before I need hospice. Gary pointed out, you can't just drop everything to take care of me. You're already supporting 2 kids in college. I work for an insurance company that values family leave, Tracy explained. Bobby can use his vacation time, and we can make it work. That might only give us a couple of months. I replied, it's not enough. Well, we could take turns and stretch it out to 4 months. I can manage on my own the rest of the time. Tracy suggested. I didn't like the sound of this plan. While I knew Gary was our oldest friend, Tracy had just volunteered to spend several months away from me and our home to care for him. Since she made the offer in front of Gary, backing out would make me look like the bad guy. Still, Tracy, that's a big commitment. I began, but she cut me off with a glare. That's settled. That's what we're going to do, she declared. I swallowed hard and stayed silent that night. As soon as I walked through the door, I couldn't hold back my frustration. What's going on, Tracy? You're just going to leave me for months to take care of an old flame? You're so selfish, she yelled. Is this about him sleeping with me? Before you, I slept in Jeffy's old room that night. It took us 3 days to reach an agreement on helping Gary, which basically meant Tracy got her way, and we did exactly as she promised. Gary, he was grateful. And I lost count of how many times he thanked Tracy and me after the first month. I couldn't help but feel guilty for my initial reaction after the first month. I was pretty worn out from juggling work, taking care of my home, and assisting Tracy with Gary, who had his good and bad days. By the second month, I started feeling something was off between Tracy and me. I figured she must have been tired too, with everything she was doing for Gary, sometimes more than I thought was necessary. So, I didn't dwell on it too much. But I couldn't help noticing the subtle exchanges between Tracy and Gary, like they had their own secret language. Things went downhill. Even more over the next couple of months, there were times I felt like I was intruding on their time together. I also noticed Tracy was a bit distant during our intimate moments after a week apart. I was eager to reconnect, but she seemed disinterested. I figured it was probably due to exhaustion, both mentally and physically. After 4 months, I had used up all my days off. And even though Gary's health was declining, I knew he still had some time left. Tracy would have to handle everything on her own, and I had to come to terms with being alone for a month or more. When I ran out of time, our daughter Kaylee stepped in to help, which I thought was wonderful. Since Gary was her godfather, she spent 2 weeks at different times assisting her mum. About a month later, Gary had to move into hospice care, and within another month he passed away. I flew back to California for his funeral. Tracy was devastated, just like Gary's parents. They couldn't thank Tracy and me enough for all our help. But I redirected most of the gratitude to my wife. When Tracy returned home, she seemed distant with me at first, which I figured was due to her grief. Then, out of nowhere, things changed, and for the next 3 weeks we were intimate every single day. It felt like we were young again. A month later, Tracy shocked me by coming out of the bathroom with a positive pregnancy test. I should have been surprised by her lack of surprise, but I was too stunned by the news itself. Tracy and I were both 45. Our kids were 22 and 20. And wait, wasn't she on birth control? I'm sorry, baby, but I forgot my pills when we went to California, and once I stopped taking them, I never started again. When we got back, and you know we're against termination, we can handle this together. Just like before, I found myself agreeing with her. Though, I was in disbelief. Wow, I was going to be a father again for about a week. I couldn't wipe the grin off my face, and with Tracy's increased libido, we were intimate every night, sometimes twice. It was almost overwhelming, but in a good way. When my daughter came home for a long weekend, she and Tracy went out shopping for baby and maternity stuff. We'd already gotten rid of all our old baby gear. They came back all excited and joking, and I ended up lugging in a bunch of bags from the car. The girls whipped up a quick dinner, and we all chuckled as Tracy shared her thoughts on the differences between the things she bought today and what was around a couple of decades ago. She mentioned feeling a bit awkward in some of the maternity clothes, because they seemed more suited for women 20 years younger. Well, Mum, it's not your fault if you're a mill and someone took it too seriously. Kaylee joked. As I thought about Kayle's comment, I noticed Tracy giving her a quick frown. It struck me that Kaylee said someone instead of dad. It wasn't just a passing remark, and it made my stomach churn. It brought back some of the discomfort I felt when I visited California to help with Gary. I kept my thoughts to myself, but stay alert for the rest of the weekend. I heard a few more comments with double meanings, and I wondered if my daughter was aiming them at me or my wife. I tried to subtly find out when Tracy was out of the room, asking Kaylee how she felt about becoming a big sister. Again, I could tell she was thinking hard about how to answer. She avoided eye contact for about 30 seconds. Then let out a giggle before trying to cover it with a fake cough. I think it's cool. That mom is still so hot, and you're like the man, she said, looking uncomfortable and quickly leaving the room. I reached for a couple more cigarettes from the pack I'd started carrying around. Tracy kept growing bigger, and I thought she looked more lovely every week, even though I still felt uneasy. I couldn't quite figure out what was bothering me. Or maybe I just didn't want to think about it. A few months later, while I was at work, I got a surprising call from Tracy. She'd taken time off from her job after returning for just 3 months. Hey, Dad, mind giving me a ride to the hospital today? She asked in a flirtatious tone, since I thought Tracy was only around 6 or 6.5 months pregnant. And she sounded incredibly seductive. I wasn't sure what she was asking. Why the hospital, honey? Is something wrong? I asked, feeling more than a little worried. Well, babe, my water broke, and I just don't feel like walking to the hospital, she purred. Oh crap, was all I could think to say. I grabbed my keys quickly, told my boss the news, and rushed out to my car. Although I lived 15 minutes away from work that day, I made the drive in just 12 minutes. I couldn't shake the feeling that Tracy was too calm for someone who was only 6 or 6.5 months pregnant. A premature birth isn't good for the baby's health. When I got home, Tracy seemed surprisingly relaxed, but I was more nervous than I'd ever been with our first 2 children. 10 hours later, I became the father of another beautiful, seemingly perfect daughter, or so I thought. I felt sick to my stomach. And then some after the nurse took the baby to clean her up. She started to hand her to me, but instinctively I pulled back, much to the nurse's surprise. This baby was full term. "Right, Doc," I whispered, barely audible. He glanced at me, then over at Tracy, who was still being cleaned by another nurse. They shared a look, and then I noticed Tracy subtly shake her head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Marsley, but I can't discuss the baby's health with you. You're not authorized on the privacy list. It's a HIP AA regulation," he replied. I'm not proud of what I did next. But I lost control to hell with HIP AA. I yelled, causing him and every nurse in the delivery room to startle. If that's my kid, I have every right to know about their health, and if she's not mine, and you know it, you can't legally list me on the birth certificate without my consent, and let me tell you, you definitely don't have it now. Get me a damn DNA test. The room fell silent as I stormed out, shedding my delivery room gear as I left. I caught a glimpse of both our parents in the room as I exited the hospital. I hung around at the bar, downing shots number 6 and 7, and munching on a burger. By then, everyone who mattered in my life had called except for the doctor with the DNA results. I figured Tracy didn't want to drag things out, because at that point it seemed pretty clear. Damn it, I guess 7 shots of Jack and a boatload of stress take precedence over finding out your wife gave birth to someone else's kid. Because I slept like a rock that night, my voicemail and inbox were jam-packed, assuming everything went smoothly. After I left, I was supposed to bring Tracy and the baby home. Today, I took a quick shower and headed back to the hospital, feeling like I was being pummeled from the inside out. Tracy was nursing the baby when I arrived at her room. I walked in, slumped into the chair by her bed, and didn't say a word. The baby was dozing. So Tracy unhooked her and settled her into the bassinet next to her bed. "I don't even know where to start, Bobby," Tracy whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "It wasn't planned. I went there to support him, to be a friend, honestly. But then he had some rough days, and one time, he was crying, and things happened. We ended up in bed like old times once it started. It was hard to stop, especially when you'd visit. We'd go back to being together. And it felt weird and guilty. But I didn't know how to stop. Maybe I didn't want to. We were together for 4 months. The last 2 non-stop since you weren't around. But truthfully, we were intimate when I wasn't on birth control too. So it could have been you who got me pregnant. But it wasn't." She kept her gaze on the baby as she confessed, "I absorbed it all, until wait, you were with Gary when Kaylee was here?" I asked, feeling dazed. Tracy blushed deeply, and I struggled to contain my anger. "She knew and didn't tell me," I exclaimed, frustration overwhelming me. "Please tell me you at least talked to her, or promised her something. This can't be real. Did Jeffrey know, or our parents? Is everyone aware that I've been betrayed?" I vented my voice, raw. Tracy's eyes widened, tears trickling down her cheeks. "I trusted Kay to understand. We didn't hide it from her." "Yes, I asked her to keep it secret. That's on me," Tracy admitted. "No, Jeffrey doesn't know, and he won't. Only you, me, and Kaylee know. I want to keep it that way so we can do right by Bobby Geraldine. She might not be biologically yours, but she's yours. Now we have to be there for her. Just like we are for Kaylee and Jeffrey. We're her parents, plain and simple. We're doing this for her, and to our best friend. Best friend? Friend? He couldn't have been my best friend if he slept with you. You just don't do that to someone you call a friend." He was dying. "Bobby, we had been intimate before," Tracy explained. "But not while you were married to me." "Right. Or is there more you're not telling me?" I pressed. Her eyes flashed with anger. "No, absolutely not. Bobby Geraldine. Really? Is that supposed to make things better?" "What's her last name?" "Bobby Geraldine Martin. Remember, that's my last name too. But Gary's listed as her father on the birth certificate, only you, and I need to know about that if you still don't want to be listed," she clarified. "Oh right," I muttered. "Why Bobby? He was our friend. He's gone. I offered him comfort and love in his final days." "What's wrong with that? You make it sound noble, but you were married. You crossed a line. You didn't consider our vows, our trust, or how it would affect me." I countered. "Yes. It's your body, and I don't control you, but we promised faithfulness before our families and God. We should have talked about this first. Our vows weren't meaningless. I won't raise a child another man fathered with my unfaithful wife. But she's Gary's child." Tracy protested. You'd raise her if Gary had died, and she was alone, maybe. But I never agreed to raise his child with you, I replied. Sadly, you know I care about you, Bobby. I don't want to risk losing what we have because of this mistake, I interjected. No, that's not what I was going to say. She retorted, okay, maybe it wasn't the smartest choice. But I won't call it a mistake. The mistake was not discussing it first, and I take responsibility for that. We didn't talk about it. Because you knew I wouldn't approve of you being with Gary, let alone having his child, I grumbled, and if it weren't for you getting pregnant, you might never have told me about the affair. Despite how it started, you chose to keep doing it, even in front of our daughter, humiliation spelled out loud and clear. Bobbyy, thanks lot. Kay and Jeffrey both returned from college the following weekend to meet their new sibling. I was distant with my daughter when she arrived, and she seemed guilty. Kaylee and I cooked dinner together that night, while she and Jeffrey CED over the baby for an hour. She avoided making eye contact with me. As we worked silently in the kitchen after dinner, Jeffrey cleared the table, and I pulled Kay aside to talk privately on the back patio. I confronted her. You knew Mum was cheating on me, and didn't say a word. Kay recoiled at my outburst, her eyes welling with tears. She hesitated before finally meeting my pained gaze. I thought what you and Mum were doing for Uncle Gary was admirable. When Mum did what she did well, I was shocked at first. But then I saw it as courageous, sad, compassionate, and loving, almost like a Shakespearean tragedy. I never imagined she'd get pregnant. I thought he was too sick for that, and I assumed she was on birth control, a compassionate friend, or a cheating witch. I guess those are my options. Then I angrily said, as she wept, what about the disaster that's become of my marriage? Did you even think about your old man? Obviously not. The kids returned to college on Sunday afternoon. After that, it was just us three, and the house felt eerily quiet. Tracy tried multiple times over the next few days to involve me with the baby, even if it was just holding her for a moment every time. I declined, much to her frustration. You're acting like a child, she yelled at me. Once, when she asked me to hold the baby for a moment, hey, grow up and take responsibility. Tracy rarely used strong language with me in all our years together. I could tell she was angry, but I wasn't concerned. I stared blankly at her and left the room without saying a word. Work became my refuge. I could spend 40 hours a week away from home. When I was there, I often found myself alone. I had a lot to sort out. I knew I shouldn't blame the baby. It wasn't her fault, but at the same time, she wasn't my responsibility, she was Tracy's. Eventually, I concluded that divorce was my only choice. I couldn't tolerate Tracy's betrayal and disrespect, and every time I looked at the baby, all I could picture in my mind was Tracy and Gary together. I returned home to find Tracy sitting at the kitchen table, tears streaming down her face with a cup of coffee and a large envelope spread out in front of her. I guess I'll order pizza, pepperoni, and breadsticks, all right, I said softly. As I entered the room, is that all you care about dinner? She snapped, her tone filled with bitterness. Don't you love me anymore? I sighed heavily, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat down at the table. I don't love you nearly as much as I did a few weeks ago, I replied. You don't seem to realize that you destroyed everything when you got involved with our best friends. If I were you, I'd find myself a lawyer and go inform Gary's parents that they have a granddaughter. I'm sure they'll be ecstatic. No. I don't want a divorce. I still love you. Just calm down and think this through. Will you really be better off alone? I doubt it. Please think about it, honey, that's all. I've been doing this isn't just about me, it's about you breaking our promises and tearing my heart apart. I explained, but if you love me, can't you find it in your heart to forgive? We can move past this, we belong together. Bobby, you know it, I thought I did. But this isn't something you can fix with a simple sorry. 24 years down the drain, my first call was to my son. I told him about Tracy's actions and the baby being Gary's child. He listened quietly, then muttered a curse. I informed him that I had filed for divorce. I hope so, Dad, that's terrible. What was Mum thinking? He tried to comfort me. I could tell he was really upset with his mother. I reassured him that despite what Tracy did to me, she still loved him just as much. He asked me, What I planned to do about the baby? Absolutely nothing. She's not my responsibility, neither financially nor emotionally. I'm sure things will be fine financially, I replied. Just help take care of your sister, half-sister, dad, half-sister. I hadn't spoken to my parents until the day after Tracy was served. My dad was furious with both of us. Tracy for betraying me, and me for allowing Tracy to spend time alone with Gary. You knew they had feelings for each other long ago. I can't believe you'd be that oblivious. Even if you trusted her completely, come on boy. You know you can't trust any other guy when it comes to your woman. I had to agree with him. I should have put up more of a fight to keep Tracy away from Gary. That part at least was my fault. Mum saw things differently from Dad. She thought I was wrong for leaving Tracy and not trying to reconcile everyone. Makes mistakes, she said softly, while Dad sat there looking angry. Mum, a mistake would have been if she had slept with him once. Sleeping with him for 4 months was a choice, hardly a mistake, and doing it without protection, unbelievable. I argued, still Bobby deep down. You know you still love her, and she's going to need help raising the baby. That's your responsibility. Robert, by the way, I still consider that baby my third grandchild. Mum added the way Mum used my full name, and her tone told me she was siding with Tracy. Dad glanced at the ceiling, then back at me. He knew he'd be in trouble with her later. I didn't call Kay. I figured she was probably Tracy's first call after being served. My assumption was confirmed when Kaylee angrily called me later that day. Uncle Gary's dead. Dad, forget about the affair. She can't change it now. Move forward. You and Mum still love each other, and now there's a baby involved. Step up for Mum and Bobby G, she urged. Sage advice from someone who didn't feel the need to tell her own father that her mother was cheating somehow. I don't feel the need to consider your opinion anymore, I replied. I later heard that Gary's parents were shocked and thrilled to learn they had a granddaughter. They were upset Tracy had planned to keep it a secret, but they understood her reasons a day later. They called me, urging me to stay with Tracy and raise Gary's daughter. They believed I was the best person for the job, given our close bond over the years. Thanks for the confidence, but I'm not that guy. I'm too furious with Gary and Tracy to think straight. I confessed I could almost feel Gary's parents recoil over the phone, but I couldn't bring myself to feel too guilty. I was just being honest. Then came the calls from my in-laws, pleading for me to stay with Tracy. They acknowledged her actions were terrible and foolish, but believed she still loved me and wanted to raise her child with me. I appreciated their concern, but doubted I could overlook what had happened. Tracy fought the divorce, and her lawyer arranged 12 joint counseling sessions. I had to go, but I wasn't about to be a pushover during them. When I entered Dr. Jocelyn McAdam's office, she seemed proper and professional. She looked about 10 years older than Tracy and me, dressed in a grey blazer and businesslike skirt. Tracy was already seated to my right. Dr. McAdam asked Tracy to speak first, and as she did, I drifted off into my own thoughts. I assumed I'd have my chance to speak next, but I was wrong. Mr. Martin, it appears that you hold the key to your marriage's fate by setting aside your pride and working things out with Tracy. You can keep your family intact. Wow, that was unexpected coming from a supposed professional. It felt like everyone was telling me to suck it up, and move on. Had I entered some alternate reality? Wait a second, Doc, I began. But she cut me off. Dr. McAdam, please, let's keep this professional. I don't want either of you to see me as a personal friend or ally. Is that your stance? Dr. McAdam, is that what matters most to you? It seems like you've already taken a side without hearing my side of the story. I stood up, turned, and walked out. On the way home, I called my lawyer, insisting on a neutral counselor for future sessions. The next counselor, at least, H'd me out after hearing Tracy's side. But I still felt like I was fighting an uphill battle. You've admitted you still care for your wife. Mr. Martin, she loves you, and now there's a baby involved. What would it take to reconcile? Dr. Lauren Avent asked. Firstly, we've never really been a family. That's not my child. I won't raise someone else's baby, I replied. So, this is about your pride then, Dr. Avent said, with a smug look. I can't seem to win with you folks, can I? I said, frustration evident in my voice. Why is this all about me? Let me paint a picture with words. I wasn't the one who betrayed my spouse or had another man's child. You should be asking Tracy why she made those choices and what she plans to do about them. I said pointedly. I glanced at Tracy and noticed her frown. The counselor tried to keep a neutral expression. But I didn't see that coming. Like the old Monty Python joke about the unexpected Spanish Inquisition. Mr. Martin, if you divorce your wife and later marry a woman with children, wouldn't you essentially be raising another man's child? Dr. On queried. Well, he got me there, Doc, but in Tracy's case, the child was conceived while we were married, which I think is a big difference, don't you? She nodded slightly, but she wasn't done. But since the man in question died before the child was born, aren't we just splitting hairs? Aren't you being petty about it now, Doctor? Avon countered. Petty is when you know you messed up, but choose to hide it. She didn't confess until I confronted her. I retorted. She seemed about to continue. But I had enough, Doc. This is absurd. Yes, I still love her. You can't just switch that off. But how can she claim to love me when she cheated, got pregnant and tried to pass off? The baby is mine. If she truly loved me, she wouldn't have done that. It wasn't a one-time thing. They had multiple encounters. Now she's telling everyone. It was out of compassion. He was a close friend, and he was dying. If it was so compassionate, why didn't she discuss it with me, her husband? Because she knew I would say no, and she knew it. I understand, it's her body. But once we made vows, she gave up the right to give her body to another man without talking to me. Just as I should do if I wanted to be with another woman once we committed to each other. We weren't operating in isolation. Simple as that, Doc. I concluded. The counselor sat there, appearing like a compatient with her eyes open, tapping her pen on her pad. Is there enough love left for you to try being a husband and father? Dr. Avent asked. You still love your wife, and the baby's biological father is gone. Let's not make her a victim. Saint, step up. That's a good one, Doc. Attacking my manhood, my wife and our best friend tore my heart out. If he were alive, I'd punch him. My love for her is fading fast. As for the baby, it's unfortunate but not my responsibility. Translation. There's no saving this marriage. At the next counseling session, I stayed silent except for greetings and farewells. Tracy begged and cried. I can see you won't reconsider, Mr. Martin. I'll inform the judge. Dr. On concluded. Thanks, Doc. The divorce was finalized. 6 months later, just before Christmas, in our no-fay divorce state, we split everything evenly. Tracy paid me for my share of the house, which was fair since she had a child. To raise Gary's inheritance helped with the house, and I provided alimony. Since I earned more, though my son supported me, I knew he wanted to spend Christmas with the family, including his mother, sister, and baby half-sister. I agreed, planning to celebrate New Year's together. 2 days before Christmas, I visited my old house to drop off gifts for everyone, including my ex-wife and her baby. It wasn't much, but I didn't want to seem petty in front of my kids. Tracy was surprised to see me holding Bobby. Geraldine, when she answered the door, she hesitantly let me in, surprised by the gifts. Walking into the living room, I noticed the familiar Christmas decorations, but I hadn't set them up this time. Tracy saw the emotion on my face as I looked around and fought back tears. Want some eggnog, Bobby? Then I'll put the presents under the tree. Could you hold the baby for a bit? I wanted to refuse, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Reluctantly, I took the baby, her baby, with Gary. I fought back the feeling rising in my stomach. As she went to get the eggnog, I held the child at arm's length for about 30 seconds, then cradled her in my arm, like I used to do with my own kids long ago, and sat down. Tracy returned with 2 glasses of eggnog, and sat in the other chair, smiling as she saw the baby in my arm. Were always great with the kids. Bobby, not every man has your touch with babies, she said softly. I smiled awkwardly. The baby was beautiful, mostly like her mother, but I couldn't shake the discomfort, given the circumstances. Can you forgive if you can't forget? I doubted it, though many in my family disagreed. After some small talk, Tracy took the presents and began arranging them under the tree. She paused at the first one with Bobby, Geraldine's name. You didn't have to include her. Bobby, Tracy said, a tear slipping down her face. Christmas is for everyone, babe. I couldn't leave her out. I glanced at the baby in my arms. In different circumstances, she could have been mine. I felt a lump in my throat. I couldn't blame the child, even though I despise what her mother did. It wasn't by chance that Tracy handed me the baby to hold. Tracy got emotional when she spotted the first present with her name on it. Oh, Bobby, really? You shouldn't have. I wasn't expecting anything. I didn't get you anything. I'm sorry, don't worry about it. Tracy, I just want you guys to have a great Christmas. You know you could come over in person, you'd be more than welcome, we'd have plenty of food, I know the kids would love it too, she said, not this time. Trace, maybe another year, it's too soon, too raw for me. Tracy lowered her gaze. I wasn't trying to be mean, I was being honest, my wounds were still fresh on Christmas Eve. I found myself at Barnes & Noble in the late afternoon. I was engrossed in a new Clive Cussler book I'd bought for myself, sipping on a peppermint mocha latte from the Starbucks. Inside there were a couple of other folks reading in Starbucks too, like me. We were practically kicked out when they are closed. I went home to a quiet house. But I was prepared. I'd picked up some chicken salad and made some toast. Ruffles, chips, and Don Julio tequila rounded out my meal. I sure know how to treat myself. I woke up a bit hungover on Christmas morning after 4 aspirin, a couple of Pop-Tarts, and 3 cups of coffee. I was ready. The only hitch, I didn't have any big plans. I ended up at my parents' place where we enjoyed Mum's baked ham dinner and exchanged a few gifts. My kids had left presents for me. There, once they knew I'd be around for the holiday, we sipped on hot chocolate with peppermint schnapps after dinner. Memories of past Christmases flooded my mind. I admitted to myself that I still had some feelings for Tracy, and I wondered if I'd made the right decision. It seemed like everyone was reflecting on their past, including me. We hope you're okay with it, Bobby, but Dad and I see Bobby Geraldine as our grandkid, and we got her Christmas presents. Mom broke the silence. Gary's gone, Bobby the baby won't know him, Sheck accept any good man as her dad. We don't agree with what Tracy did, but we kind of get it, and we still love her. You could step up. Bobby, you should. Everybody wants that, and I think you do too, you just don't know how to admit it. You worry people will think less of you for taking her back and raising the baby. Mum teared up when she finished. Dad shot daggers at me. Was I the only one missing something? Maybe. But I couldn't live with myself if I did that. She cheated for months, tried to trick me, and had another guy's baby. Her excuse about Gary being compassion, it fell flat to me a year later. Not much had changed. Work, home alone, no dating, fewer friends. I never had many friends anyway. Tracy had lots, and as a couple, we did too. But they mostly vanished after the divorce. I wasn't shocked her friends left, but I was surprised our mutual ones did too. Until one former friend spilled the beans. Tracy was telling everyone I ditched her after the baby without mentioning it wasn't mine. I was at a local bar solo when Carl and Susie Demi walked in and sat down. They were part of our friend circle, but their reception when I greeted them was icy. Susie sneered, and Carl was barely polite. I hadn't done anything to upset them. So, I was pissed at the frosty welcome and wasn't about to let it slide. What the heck did I do to you guys? I snapped. Not to us, but to Tracy. Susie spat. How could you abandon the sweetest woman alive just 'cause she had a baby late in life? You're awful, you know. Is that what this is about? I asked, stunned. Hear me out before you judge. They gestured for me to take a seat, but I was too agitated. So I remained standing in front of their table. I leaned in close to avoid shouting. Let me guess, nobody told you that the child you're talking about isn't mine. Right, she got pregnant by her ex, who passed away from cancer shortly after she tried to trick me into thinking it was mine. 24 years of marriage, and this is the loyalty I get. No, I didn't leave her. She left me. Screw her, screw both of you, and screw whatever else you believe. I left my stunned ex-friends at the table. My second Christmas as a divorced man kicked off just like the first one. This year's Christmas Eve Losers Club at Barnes & Noble consisted of 4 people, me, another guy, and 2 women. I glanced over at them. One had curly red hair, freckles, and a friendly face, while the other, she was stunning Asian with long black hair curves peeking through her sweatshirt and tight jeans. Her skin was flawless, and I figured she was around 50 or so. After observing her for a moment, I thought why not all she could do was say, no. I grabbed my book and latte and approached her. She looked up. As I got closer, I didn't see you here last Christmas Eve. You're new to the Christmas Eve Losers Club. I'm Bobby, the club president. What brings such a beautiful woman out on this special day? She giggled at my lame joke, which was the most pleasant sound I'd heard in a while. Encouraged, I continued. I know it's a long shot, but I actually have another Hungry Man dinner in my freezer that I could heat up tonight if you don't already have plans. I know we've just met, but I tried my best to give an innocent look, hoping. I still remembered how to do it well. I don't usually do anything wild like this. But since you're the club president and you're talking about Hungry Man.
Yeah.
I'm in, by the way. I'm Angel Wang, Bobby Martin, club president, here to serve. I shared my address with her and told her to come over at 6. Then, I headed home to get the dinner cooking. Both meals were heating up. When she arrived exactly at 6, I couldn't help but think we were both a bit crazy. We sat down at the kitchen table to eat our dinners and share a bottle of Burgundy. I opened up about why I was at Barnes & Noble on Christmas Eve, and she shared her story. In return, Angel, who was 5 years older than me at 52, had been divorced for 10 years after leaving an abusive husband. They were married for 16 years. But his abuse began after a decade and escalated until he put her in the hospital with a broken jaw. Angel was petite, standing at 5 feet 1 in, and weighing around 100 pounds, while her ex was slightly taller and heavier at 5 feet 2 in, and 120 pounds. Angel found it hard to leave him believing she was to blame. It wasn't until a counselor helped her realize she wasn't at fault that she decided to divorce him after waking up in the hospital from another. Beating her husband, was convicted of battery, and served 2 years in jail before disappearing from her life. Entirely fortunately, they didn't have any children. Angel confessed that she hadn't dated much since her divorce and had no family in the area. Christmas was always a tough time for her. She admitted holding back tears. It might have been a bit crazy for me to agree to come here tonight, but I just didn't want to be alone, and who could say no to a Hungry Man dinner, she admitted. I was wallowing in self-pity at Barnes & Noble. But talking with Angel made me realize I still had it better than many. We settled on my couch, sipping wine, and watching a few Christmas movies. We started with the Mr. Muo version of A Christmas Carol, and I knew Angel was something special. When she fully agreed with my take that Mr. Mew was the ultimate Scrooge, after that we watched Grinch. And by the halfway point of It's a Wonderful Life, I noticed Angel had drifted off. She looked so peaceful that I grabbed a big quilt, covered her with half, and snuggled under the other. At some point, I must have dozed off to when I woke up. We weren't sitting up side by side anymore. Somehow we were lying down with Angel's head resting on my chest, and half her body draped over mine. I had one arm wrapped around her tightly, while my other hand found its way into a back pocket. The TV was playing softly in the background. As strange as it was, it felt so right to hold Angel as she slept for another 20 minutes. When she stirred and opened her eyes, confusion flashed across her face. I lifted my head as much as I could and gently kissed her nose. She crinkled it up cutely and then flashed me the brightest smile I'd seen in years. Morning, she asked hesitantly. Merry Christmas, I replied, squeezing her tighter. We lay there, both smiling for another 5 minutes before she spoke up again. I've never done anything like this before, I swear, she protested, her cheeks turning red. But is it just me, or do you feel it too? I grinned from ear to ear. Hell yes, I'm feeling it. She inched closer until our lips met and we shared a passionate kiss. It wasn't long before clothes started coming off. She was even more amazing than I had imagined. I thought to myself that this situation was pretty wild. Even though I had just met this woman, everything felt so right between us. Then when I glanced up, I saw her looking at me, and it seemed like she was thinking the same thing. You know, this might sound crazy, I began, but do you happen to have any plans for today? Because I've got all the fixings for a top-notch Christmas dinner. And if I'm going to go through all this trouble, well, it wouldn't hurt to have a beautiful woman sitting across the table from me. Her smile widened, warming my heart. I need a shower. And I didn't bring any spare clothes, she said. I smiled back. My shower is big enough for 2, and I'm sure I have a shirt or something that would fit you. Her eyes sparkled. If you can handle seeing me without makeup, I'm in, she replied. We headed to the kitchen, and I poured us each a glass of Rang as I started preparing the meal. So you don't have any plans today? No family gathering or anything, she asked. Well, I was invited to a big family Christmas dinner this year. But I told them I had other plans. I explained my ex is hosting everyone at our old house. The kids, my parents, her parents, and Gary's parents. It's a whole setup, she'll make sure. I hold her cute kid, all the parents will be telling me to step up, and she'll be there telling me she loves me and needs me, that we can make it work again. I said I had other plans, but everyone knows I'm lying. I told her I tried to stop by for a bit. If I could. They don't understand where I'm coming from. I didn't cheat. I shouldn't have to apologize. Because Tracy cheated and messed up. We had something special until we didn't. But, speaking of something special, how about we focus on us? We both smiled. I walked over to Angel, and we shared a deep kiss just then. I heard a key in the door lock, and the door swung open. It was my son calling out as he entered Angel, and I froze in the middle of our kiss. Dad, he called out, before spotting us. Oh wow. He glanced at us, kissing, then shifted his gaze to Angel's fully exposed legs. I'm pretty sure all three of us turned red. Angel hurriedly lowered her legs and stood behind me, trying to appear modest in that sweater. Jeffrey quickly turned away, seemingly to respect Angel's modesty, though I think he was just as embarrassed as she was. Mum knows I have a key to your place, and she asked me to come here and drag you back to the house for Christmas dinner, because she was sure you were sitting here by yourself, being pathetic. Well, I guess you weren't lying about your previous engagement, and that's hardly pathetic. I'm sorry if I interrupted something. You're not interrupting anything other than my Christmas meal prep, I said a bit too hastily. As Angel and I exchanged embarrassed looks. Jeffrey, can you turn around so I can properly introduce you to Angel? My angel. Jeffrey reluctantly turned around and stepped into the kitchen. It was pretty obvious that Angel had nothing under the sweater. But at least she was covered. She glanced at me, shrugged, and then embraced the situation. Jeff, being a typical guy, couldn't resist. He stole another glance at Angel, then gave me a nod of approval. Nice to meet you, Angel, and thanks for being here for my dad. Jeffrey said, it's my pleasure. Jeffrey, your dad's pretty great, Angel replied. Yeah, seems like some folks in the family forgot that for a bit, he remarked. Did everyone dig the gifts I dropped off? I asked, shifting gears. How about Bobby G? Did she like her presents? You've still got the magic touch, Dad. Everyone loved their goodies. The baby adored her gifts. You wouldn't believe how much stuff she scored under the tree, especially with all the grandparents pitching in. Jeffrey answered, good, I said, nodding in satisfaction. Then Jeffrey mentioned he had to head out. After nodding at Angel, he got a big hug from me. New Year's, I suggested. I swear, Angel will be more dressed. Oh yeah, he replied, turning red. Once Jeffrey left, Angel shot me a look. That wasn't too awkward, was it? She questioned. And what's this about New Year's? I don't get a said, not this time. I teased, but where else would my future wife be on New Year's? Pretty confident. Huh, she teased back. I'll be even more confident when you pick out your ring tomorrow morning at Can I at least go home first and put on some clothes, if you insist? I said, pretending to be disappointed. The following morning, Angel selected a 1-carat Maris-cut diamond engagement ring. Afterward, we grabbed lunch, and I shared the news of our engagement with my son, and then my parents. While my son was genuinely happy for me, my parents didn't seem as thrilled. I think they still held on to the hope that I'd reconcile with Tracy and raise her child as my own. Isn't this all a bit sudden, dear? My mum questioned. Are you sure you're not doing this just to get back at Tracy? You know she still cares for you, right, Mum? I'm not out for revenge, and as for Tracy's feelings, her actions speak louder than words, don't they? Tracy's priority is Tracy. I didn't bother informing my daughter, though we had patched things up to some extent. She still sided with her mother, seeing Tracy's actions as heroic and rooted in love. I figured she'd eventually find out and try to convince me to take her mother back over. Angel, after spending more than 25 years with Tracy, my budding relationship with Angel seemed inexplicable. I couldn't rationalize our mutual attraction or how seamlessly she fit into my life. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, and it felt like we'd been together forever. While I wasn't one to believe in love at first sight, everything about us felt right. Angel wasn't a spring chicken, either, and she appeared just as bewildered by our instant and profound connection as I was initially. We analyzed things extensively, but then we realized we were overthinking it. and decided to let things unfold naturally, and natural felt right. Within a month, she moved in with me, and for the next 6 months, we were rarely apart. Despite Angel not being Tracy, my parents seemed to approve of her. However, my daughter, Kaylee, made her dislike for Angel evident, presumably because she still hoped I'd reconcile with her mother. We had a small wedding for ourselves. 6 months later, I invited both children and my parents, while Angel invited a cousin, a friend, and their families. We booked a private room at one of my favorite restaurants for a cozy celebration. It was a wonderful day, except when Kaylee confronted me questioning why Tracy, Bobby G, and my former in-laws weren't invited. I didn't invite your mother because she's my ex-wife, and it wouldn't be fair to Angel. Plus, we're not on friendly terms. Ex-in-laws don't usually get wedding invites. Angel and Tracy finally met 2 years later. At Kale's wedding, Tracy organized a beautiful event, and I happily covered the expenses. Angel, being elegant and intelligent, tactfully stayed out of the mother of the bridesmaid during the planning at the wedding. Besides financing it, I proudly walked Kaylee down the aisle. Memories flooded in as I glanced at Tracy, recalling moments with her and Kaylee like coloring and baking cookies. It reminded me that our 24 years together weren't all bad. Angel sensed my emotions and comforted me during the church service. Her gentle kiss assured me that I could handle the day during the rehearsal dinner, and wed Angel interacted with Tracy only when necessary, not out of fear but out of respect. Tracy, on the other hand, seemed annoyed whenever she saw Angel. Later, I learned she and the grandparents believed Angel was taking Tracy's place and that our marriage wouldn't last. Fast forward, our supposed short-term marriage just hit 25 years. Angel and I celebrated with a nice dinner and a quiet night together. It wasn't as wild as it might have been years ago, but we enjoyed cuddling afterward, falling asleep in each other's arms. Looking back, I can't complain about life's journey. The child got heap of love from all 3 sets of grandparents, until they passed away from old age. My son, the only one who stayed in contact regularly after my divorce, said Tracy didn't date for the first 5 years, probably thinking my marriage wouldn't last. I'm sure Angel disappointed her. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to my channel for more video like this.